Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. My name is Yin. I'm the Marketing Executive at Rexel, and I'll be hosting the session today. We'll be starting shortly. We're just going to allow a little bit more time for the rest of the attendees to log in. Thank you for your patience, and we'll get going in a few moments. Hello everyone, and welcome again to today's webinar with GivEnergy on energy storage for the masses. My name is Yin, I'm the Marketing Executive at Rexel. Before we start, I've just got a couple of things for you to note. This is a recorded webinar and it will be available to watch on demand on the Rexel website. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A bubble, which you can select from the menu on the side, and we will answer them at the very end. Today, I am joined by Brian Beaver, the Sales and Marketing Director at GivEnergy. I'll now pass the time over to Brian.
Thanks, Yin. So good afternoon to everyone. As Yin mentioned, my name's Brian Beaver. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at GivEnergy. Really grateful to our friends at Rexel for giving us the opportunity to stage this webinar today. So the idea is it's just a look at the energy storage market, perhaps how home batteries are changing a little bit and the situation in the market is changing a little bit, and hopefully to show how it's a really good opportunity for our installer base or the Rexel customer base of qualified electrical contractors, and hopefully how it shows how there's a lot of opportunity in this marketplace at the moment. I think, as Yin mentioned, if anyone's got any questions, there's a little sort of Q&A session at the end, so I'll be more than happy to answer anything. So what I'll do is I'll just make a little bit of a start. So the first thing to say is probably just to have a little bit of a view of how the homes in the UK have probably developed over the recent times, and just with a view to how energy efficiency in particular in homes has sort of developed. So if you go back a number of years when perhaps loft insulation was first introduced, and almost like the first acceptance that there was a big demand and a need for homes to become more energy efficient, so that probably developed through into the 70s and 80s, where double glazing sort of became new, and then I think fairly everyone would recognise that then becomes the norm. That probably went into the likes of cavity wall insulation and the development in that area. I think probably anyone who's done any building work recently, as I have at home, knows how those thermal regulations are changing all the time, and some of the modern regulations are both onerous and do encourage some quite significant benefits when it comes to those sort of energy efficiencies. If you then look at how things maybe developed 10 or so years ago into the developments of solar and solar panels, so that technology is probably 10, maybe a dozen years old now, and then what we really see is that as this decade continues to develop, that really what would perhaps have been considered to be niche technology, i.e. battery and energy storage, that we think we're now coming into the realms that as this decade proceeds, that this sort of battery and energy storage market just in people's everyday homes will become as much of a new norm as some of those other technologies have over the recent sort of 20 or 30 years or so. So if we move on and almost just have a little bit of a look of how perhaps we used to energize our homes. And I think it would be sort of fair to say that energy efficiency was almost viewed sort of through a series of silos. So people would almost check off individual lists on individual technology. So they might have insulation, they might have double glazing. Even then, as solar power came in more recent times, it was very much everything was just viewed on an individual basis rather than perhaps looking at how all the different techs integrate together. Like I say, it was all looked sort of very individually. And similarly, if anyone did actually give any thought in the past to things like, the power from the grid, very much so it would only be ever deemed to be one way, i.e. incoming power from the grid. I think it would be fair to say that, fossil fuels was definitely the only way to meet any sort of demand, certainly any peak demand. And definitely when solar was first introduced, there wasn't really any great thought given to what would happen when the power wasn't needed. So it's okay about generating it with solar during the day when people, generally speaking, weren't at home. But obviously how they get to use that power that was being generated when they perhaps actually needed it. So I think it's almost like a little bit of a scene setter that's how we used to do things. If you then look at how things are developing and how we're actually energizing our homes now, I think most of us probably on this webinar, albeit here in a sort of professional capacity if you like, but most of us are homeowners ourselves. And I think if you look at our own demands as bill payers, I think it's fair to say that we're coming out of that sort of silo view of individual technologies and looking at our homes and all the energy efficiencies of our homes with a holistic view and how all these technologies actually link together, and how those sort of energy uses, both incoming and outcoming, sort of work as a full ecosystem. I think the ability to store energy, sort of sits at the heart of any sort of energy efficient home. And at the end of the day, that requirement to store energy that sort of makes the whole ecosystem work is fundamentally where battery power and energy storage sits. So I think that's a fair thing to say, that that's how our home energy aspirations and requirements are moving forward. If you then look at similarly our view of the grid, I'd mentioned previously that it was probably only ever considered to be one way. We draw power from the grid, but now it's very much a situation where we need to look at the fact that that flow is both us demanding from the grid as consumers, but also our ability to put this over generated energy back into the grid and fundamentally benefit as individual homeowners from that ability to put energy back into the grid. I think our communication systems, people are sort of becoming fairly comfortable and familiar with smart homes, smart hubs. There's a number of existing sort of off the peg type solutions on the market at the moment. And these sort of energy management systems that we as homeowners can avail ourselves of are becoming very much part of our everyday lives. So that's definitely a move forward in the marketplace in terms of how we operate our own homes as homeowners. And these sort of smart devices and energy management systems we have at homes fundamentally means that we can take more advantage of renewable sources. I know as homeowners, 99% of those sort of sources tend to be solar, but it's not the only ones. I'm sure a few of the attendees on this webinar have been at solar and storage this week, and we've had a number of conversations with people who are looking at things like wind and hydro as well as solar. I think, as homeowners, solar tends to be the most common renewable source, but it's not unique to solar. So I suppose it's almost a case of, so that's how things looked maybe in years gone by and how things are definitely changing. And I think that the key message, if you like, is that, the days of sort of insulation and solar panels being the be all and end all of people thinking, that's how, we've got a modern home or we've got an energy efficient home because of these perhaps individual technologies, is that the thing that makes them all linked together and the things that make these efficiencies and technologies actually work better is home storage batteries. It's almost like the technology that's at the center of making these other technologies both work better and enable homeowners to take advantage of the potential that their investments in these technologies provide. So we very much see that the battery market is at the center of those technologies. And that's the key thing to, like I say, to actually enable us to take the full advantage of what the potential of this technology. I think of the sort of dozen or so slides that I've got for this, I think in many respects this is probably one of the most important ones. That it is key, and the home battery systems, like I say, we feel makes all this technology work better themselves. But one of the key messages that I'd really like to get across is that, and this is definitely the way the market is developing, so this isn't just sort of me or GivEnergy pushing this forward, is that there is a huge change whereby sort of battery only as a potential either solution in its own right, or certainly sort of a start of the journey, is a really viable option. And I think the reason why I say this is a really important slide is because one of the key messages to get across is that the benefits of home battery systems is that they do not need solar to work. And I think that there's a lot of, we still have now, like I said, being at solar and storage all week, there's still a lot of people we speak to that sort of, don't necessarily appreciate that a battery system just sits along the solar system or alongside a solar PV array. That is just not the case now. You don't need to have solar to make having a battery system a viable option. So that message will come be shown in a little bit more detail as the slides progress, but that's a real key message that to try and get across, particularly for today's audience, as I'm sure most of the audience are electrical contractors that have joined with their association with Rexel, is that there's no sort of specialist training as such required for home battery installs. Different battery manufacturers, different battery makers have different requirements for their own systems. At GivEnergy, we have a roundabout, according to MCS data, we've got about 35% market share. To install a GivEnergy system and to bring one online, we offer, it requires sort of GivEnergy training, but it's a single one-day training course to gain GivEnergy certification that is free as well. Some other manufacturers do similar things to us. Some people don't necessarily have that insistence as well. But even with the likes of our own training, it's nothing that's overly elaborate for a qualified electrician. It's something that you guys would find really easy to to sort of get to sit through. The vast majority of the training is actually to do with the commissioning and the networking into homeowners' systems at the end, rather than the actual electrical wiring as such. And if you look at sort of battery only systems, they're a really sort of fast and fairly straightforward project for installers to fit. So it is very much a case of home battery systems not sitting alongside solar are a really viable and you know, sort of quick and easy option for electrical contractors to get into that business, if you like. Sort of looking at, perhaps to a certain extent, trying to allay some of the myths that are surrounding, you know, sort of energy storage and home batteries. That I think there's sometimes there can be a little bit of a preconception that it's for huge properties, it's for people that have got lots of money or a lot of installation space to potentially put these systems. Again, just to mention the sort of solar message there, that, you know, why would I have a battery system if I haven't got solar? You know, so that myth is, you know, really does need, you know, sort of putting to bed. You know, again, that people might think, oh, well, you know, if I need to manage my system, how am I going to be, you know, sort of going into the, you know, into the system to understand, you know, when it should have it on, when I should be charging, when I should be discharging. I need to, you know, do I need to know what my tariff details are and an understanding of the energy network? Literally all these things are just not a consideration at all. The people that would benefit from a home battery system, quite simply, is just anyone that uses energy and anyone that has you know, an energy bill at the end of the month, which you know, certainly, you know, probably covers 99.99% of homeowners, if not 100%. So it's almost to try and break down some of those, you know, preconceptions that's really important. And then again, you know, perhaps really relevantly to you know, the audience today, and from an electrical contractor's perspective, you know, what do people need to do to be able to install battery systems? And again, these are all you know, just to try and sort of break down the myths, if you like. It's not necessarily for people that work in renewables. You know, for instance, you don't need MCS accreditation to install a battery system. You might need it to install a solar system, but you don't need MCS accreditation to specifically just install a battery only system. Again, to labour the point, it doesn't need to be paired with solar, which for a lot of potential installers means that, you know, you don't have to clamber up on a roof and get properties scaffolded and the sort of additional requirements and hassle potentially and risk that sort of those sort of solar installs take. There isn't any additional formal qualifications other than being a qualified electrician. Like I say, people like GivEnergy, we run certification training, but it's only a day. Some of our competitors do similar things, some don't. You know, it's not, there's no sort of specialist equipment specifically for you know, for battery installs, other than being fairly strong, because some of the batteries can be pretty heavy. But there's no specialist equipment as such. It's not a particularly long or complicated install. You know, we have lots of installers that would install a full battery system in a day, so there's no necessarily sort of big commitments, both in terms of time and particularly in terms of ongoing maintenance. So again, just to sort of, you know, sort of make that message clear, if you like, that some people who may have thought there's almost a little bit of mystery to it and or complication with linking it to solar and roof works, etc. That's just not the case for battery only installs. It's simply a case of you know, being a qualified electrician. I think, again, you know, it's a really important message. I mentioned this a couple of times, that it doesn't have to be linked from solar. At the same time, I would say that it would be, you know, fair to say that a lot of our installations, certainly up to this point, you know, are linked to solar, whether they're previous solar installs where there was no battery that were sort of battery systems are being retrofitted to, or whether they're new solar installs that, you know, probably there's hardly any solar installs, I would say, that are going ahead now that haven't got battery systems associated with them. But the journey is certainly moving. You know, we can see this with our own install and commissioning data, that the situation's changing from, you know, being tied to solar to being battery first. And, you know, it's an interesting point, because some people would say maybe just having a battery system just as a satisfactory solution, sort of full stop and end of. Some people view it that it's better to start their journey into renewables with the battery and home energy system first, and there's absolutely no problem with putting the battery system in first and then adding, you know, a solar array to it in the future, then adding, you know, a heat pump to it in the future. So I think it would be fair to say that when you're looking at you know, the capital investment for, you know, an all singing or dancing renewable solution, as many people do, and as some house builders do as well, where you've got, you know, an ecosystem of, you know, heat pumps, solar arrays, battery systems. You're obviously talking about, you know, a pretty sizable capex investment there for people, and you know, in order to stage that and make the journey more, you know, realistic in terms of the investment required, you know, it is possible to stage it. And I think if you looked at those techs, you definitely battery first is something that A, makes sense, and B, you know, you can see that we can see from our own data that that is happening. And I think, you know, with the right size system, obviously all dependent on property size and usage and time of day, etc., etc. You know, some of the you know, battery only installs can be, you know, a very realistic cost now, you know, as indicated there. So if you look at it from, it's almost just looking at this now from a couple of different perspectives. So if you look at it from the bill payer's perspective, it is almost as simple a strategy as, you know, install the home battery system and, you know, link that to a correct tariff. I think a lot of people now are sort of fairly familiar or becoming fairly familiar with the likes of EV charger tariffs, whereby, you know, the rate overnight for the charging of the vehicles, like at a fraction of the price of the electricity that they're using during the day. You know, we had, again, a lot of discussions this week with people who are sort of paying 5 and 6 pence per kilowatt for their overnight tariff, as opposed to upwards of 30 pence during the day. So, you know, what you do is the home battery, and this is how it stands as a, or sorry, this is how it works as a standalone solution, just with the battery, not necessarily with solar, is that, you know, install the battery system, link it to a suitable overnight tariff, you know, charge the battery cheap overnight on those cheap rates and use it during the day. And then, you know, you're switching from paying upwards of 30 pence per kilowatt for electricity, you know, to 5 or 6 pence, depending on the tariff details. And what we are finding, like I say, those are sort of common EV charger tariffs. What we're now in conversation with, and this sort of dominates the last, you know, few months, we have lots of partnerships and discussions with the likes of, certainly started with the likes of Octopus and OVO and EDF, because they tend to be a little bit more forward thinking than maybe the more traditional energy retailers. But we're having a lot of discussion fundamentally at the moment with Centrica and British Gas about actually battery only tariffs, rather than just solely sort of enabling people to avail themselves of the sort of EV charger overnight tariffs, and what they're seeing as the way forward. So this message is coming from them, not us, is that they see battery only tariffs as being, you know, really attractive. So they're talking now about having different sort of, rather than just being solely cheap periods overnight, is that they might have, you know, a second or even a third sort of charging window available in other off-peak times, say for argument's sake between 10 o'clock in the morning and lunchtime, or, you know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon till 3:30 type of thing. So these off-peak periods that allow you know, sort of cheaper charging rates. And what this means is that rather than, you know, the existing perhaps scenario of charging overnight and discharging during the day at peak times and use it that way, that you could actually charge and discharge the battery twice a day, if not more, rather than just once. So what that means is that it can then go to smaller batteries, because if you can charge and charge and discharge twice as opposed to once, you don't need as big a battery to make the system you know, fully workable. Smaller batteries, smaller install costs, quicker paybacks. So it's something that's really sort of moving forward. Again, you know, our particularly GivEnergy's you know, sort of technology, all our tech is, you know, uses sort of smart algorithms and ML, which is machine learning, the sort of development of AI technology. So all these sort of things, when they're linked to the tariff, they work automatically. So it's not a case of people having to actively manage their battery systems, think, oh, hang on, I changed tariffs, so now I need to start going into my system to, instruct it new ways of charging and discharging. This can all be set up automatically, so that it just takes advantage of the appropriate sort of charging periods to to make it all work properly. So this is where it becomes really sort of straightforward for people to use their battery systems, basically to make sure that they use, when they actually need the energy, that they're paying the absolute minimum for it, because they've charged the battery in those really cheap rate time periods. So, but I think it's a really key message to get across, that the energy retailers are really looking to promote this with battery only tariffs. So one or two people we're speaking to are looking at battery tariffs, one or two people maybe even having sort of GivEnergy tariffs. So that's something that's definitely, I think you will definitely see in the coming months. Again, as far as this audience is concerned, if you then look at it specifically from your perspective, it's almost a case of it might be a little bit more to it than wiring a plug, perhaps, but certainly for a qualified electrician, there is nothing unusual or out of the ordinary about this technology. So it is almost like a fairly simplistic message that for any qualified electrician, they will find the install of a battery system really straightforward. And I think the key thing is that we would say that there's far more sort of profit opportunity in this type of work when you look at the the sort of typical install costs and sort of charges. So we sort of view potentially it's a profit opportunity for either our existing installer base or for new people to come on board. Sorry. So yeah, so it's very much a case of trying to get that that sort of message across that look, we all know margins are being squeezed at every sort of point, so that hopefully it is a good profit opportunity for our installer base. So I suppose the sort of key message of it all, it's almost just as a little sort of summary slide. We're not necessarily claiming that people will put as much effort and passion into it as maybe going and picking their washing machine and cooker and other appliances from Currys at the weekend. But we do view it very much that it is almost like a message of every home should have one when it comes to home batteries. So we sort of think, if you think of the slide at the top, when some of these technologies are introduced, they do seem sort of weird and wonderful and maybe with a little bit of an air of mystery. And it shows how quickly that some of these things can just become part and part of the norm. And I think, if you look at the whole battery and energy storage market, and this isn't just GivEnergy saying this as one potential provider, it's the whole marketplace, is that it is genuinely, I think, a thing that will just be accepted as the norm in sort of 5 or 10 years time or whatever, and people will almost then not remember them not having a home battery system. So the sort of the message and the key to the sort of doing these types of sessions is almost to try and encourage the people, because I'm sure we're all aware of things like this. It's the people that get in perhaps at the earlier stages and become experts in their field that can make a little bit more of the opportunity. So we're trying to sort of appeal to people to perhaps be the more early adopters of this type of technology and opportunity, because we do sort of think that in the future it will just be considered to be just an everyday item that most houses, if not all, will have. So it's almost like trying to appeal to people to be an early adopter, get in at the the market is fairly well developed, but sort of get in still at the earlier stages and to take advantage of those opportunities. So that's the sort of message there. So I think I've spoken for about sort of 20-25 minutes there, which is about the sort of time that Yin wanted me to, I think. So those are the sort of key messages. And then obviously if anyone's got any questions, I'd be delighted to sort of take those inquiries.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's a lot of food for thought there for everyone. Hope it has been a useful session. We'll now jump into the Q&A time. If you have any questions, do type them into the Q&A bubble and that will come over to us. So, got a question that has just come through. Do you have payback time calculations for standard household installation?
You know, it's a really, really good question, that, and I think I mentioned probably once or twice during that presentation that I've been at Solar and Storage all week. It's something we get asked for a lot, or we've been asked a lot this week. We don't actually have sort of specific examples that we can just sort of fire out. Great, here's a few sort of 2 or 3 that we've prepared earlier type of thing. The reason that we haven't is because, which is a bit of a naff answer, but is actually the truth, it depends on so many factors, because it depends on house size, energy usage, time of use, tariff details, etc., that it is actually hard to give definitive answers. However, we're getting asked for it so much that I think what we need to do is almost come up with 3 or 4, perhaps almost like, very, sort of typical examples, based on, fairly sensible standard assumptions, and just have some sort of material at the ready for this type of thing. So I suppose the straight answer to the question would be we haven't, but we will have in the coming sort of weeks, because we're getting asked for it more and more. I think if I was to give an answer, and certainly based on sort of real world experiences that we've got with our pretty extensive customer base, and also we have a lot of sort of engaged end users that we have that sort of share their data with us, we would say probably battery only installs at least. Probably a typical payback period is around about between 4 and 6 years, depending on perhaps a number of factors, but I think those would be fairly typical sort of paybacks based on the data that we get from, like I say, these very engaged end users that we've got. But what we need to probably do is have a little bit of sort of basic data to show that, rather than just rely on a couple of people saying it type of thing. So not quite yet, but definitely details to follow.
That's great. Hopefully that's answered the question. Next one, how fast can they charge?
Sorry, what was that? Sorry, Ian.
How fast can they charge?
So, I mean, fundamentally, it depends on the inverter size. So, sort of typically, and I would say probably our most common residential inverters, 3.6 kilowatts. So you're looking at, charging a, again, if you link that to a battery that's, 9.5 kilowatts or 13.5 kilowatts, you're talking about, sort of 3 to 4 hour charge time to get those batteries fully charged. To, again, typically, overnight would, easily, it would be easily managed, but it's those sort of charge times.
Brilliant. And there was a follow-up question to that. Can they be installed internally, for example, in a garage?
Yeah, so the installation is a real hot topic at the moment. So there has been, if you look at historically, right, where these batteries, I mean, we've done something like, or we've got live on our portal, something like approaching 100,000 live installs now. So that's just GivEnergy as a company over the last few years. So if you look at both GivEnergy systems and the market in general, where they have been installed over the last few years, a lot of them, particularly when you're looking at social housing situations, a lot of them have been put in lofts. A lot of them have been put internally in other areas. Some people in the audience may be aware of past 63100, which is a guideline, not a regulation as such at the moment, but certainly a guideline, has started to question this, sort of siting of the battery systems internally and in loft spaces, specifically. There's a lot of blowback on this at the moment, because the the basis of those guidelines have been done on, well, fundamentally old technology, particularly with regards to Tesla and one or two others that actually used to use cobalt technology. Certainly all GivEnergy products. And to be fair, although we were the first to change this a number of years ago, most people have followed now. All our cell technology is lithium iron phosphate, and lithium iron phosphate is non-combustible. So there's actually no basis whatsoever in the past guideline that allows for lithium iron phosphate batteries, and that's where we actually are a firm believer that there should be guidelines and regulation with regards to battery storage, but we just want it to be correct. So as we literally sit here today, it would be wrong of me completely not to mention past 63100, because it's very much a thing that our industry is aware of. And like I say, there is a current guideline that they shouldn't be installed internally, but there's some big working committees at the moment with regards to actually getting these guideline and then hopefully regulations to follow, getting them in place, but making sure that they're correct. So what you'll find with battery systems at the moment is a lot of them are going outside. All ours are IP65 rated anyway. So, and again, a number of our competitors have IP65 rated solutions. So installing them outside isn't an issue with regards to that. I think if you were to ask us, from a preference, it would be to put them in garages. That's almost like the ideal place for them to go. But obviously not everyone has that, sort of facility. So I think that how the PASS guideline evolves in the coming weeks and months, I think, is a really hot topic for the industry in general, to be fair. So it'll be, really key to see how that goes.
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions. Where is the training carried out?
Okay, yeah, really good question. So from GivEnergy's perspective, we run our training courses 3 days a week, and we've got a training centre in our head office sort of associated building in Stoke, in Newcastle under Lyme, or Stoke, depending on where people are around the country. So it's all done in Stoke. What we're looking to do, or what we're in the process of doing, is bringing all our training online. Because we recognise that, for local-ish installers, Stoke isn't too bad. Obviously, it's quite a central location. We have a lot of existing installers and potential installers all over the country, from literally Scotland down to the southwest in particular, and everywhere in between. So coming to Stoke can be a bit of a squeeze time-wise. So we're bringing all our certified training online in the coming couple of months. And then also what we're doing as an interim measure is we're running a couple of training courses as team sessions. So, people can, just until the fully worked online version is available, we can sort of do it via Teams. So what we do is there's a link on our website to Eventbrite, which is the ticketing system for them. So we operate a ticketing system just to control the numbers, but the tickets are all FOC. So if you go on to GivEnergy's website, follow the installer training links, that will take you to that ticketing system. So people that can get to Stoke, it is a far better way of doing it face to face, where there's all the products in the training room, etc. But for people that just isn't feasible, there's, like I say, a sort of a hybrid version of the course that we can do online, and then very much moving forward, it will, all that certified training will be online probably by the end of this calendar year, I would say is realistic.
Okay, final question. Where are your units manufactured?
Okay, so from a GivEnergy perspective, one of the big sort of features that we would almost say is a USP for GivEnergy is that we are, and we sort of portray ourselves, I'm a very strong with the message that we're a British company. So we're British owned, lock, stock and barrel. So all our shareholders are British and British based. Our head office is in Stoke. Our commercial assembly unit is in Stoke. That's where the training centre is as well. The actual products are manufactured in China, but they are in 3 factories that are 100% owned by our British shareholders. So quite often you find that it's actually the manufacturers that own the company and not vice versa. Whereas in our situation, our British owner and ownership owns the 3 manufacturing sites in China. So we have a battery factory, an inverter factory, and an assembly factory. So those 3 sites are all in China. Really key point to mention is that our aim and plan for GivEnergy is to bring the UK products to be manufactured in the UK. And we're huge investors in the sort of Stoke and North Staffs area. So like I say, our head office is there, our commercial premises are there where the commercial systems are assembled, containerized solutions, things like that. We invest huge amounts into the local sort of Stoke and Staffs economy in particular. I think we've invested something like £3 million into projects in conjunction with Keele University over the last 2 or 3 years. And the plan is to bring all the manufacturing to that area. The biggest challenge for it is actually finding the site, because we need a huge site to be able to bring the UK products over here. So it's a plan and an aim, and we sort of think within the next 3 to 5 years, all those products for the UK market will actually be manufactured over here as well. So that answers that.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's about it. So thank you once again for everyone for joining. Thank you, Brian, for your time. If anyone does have any other questions that you think of after the session, please send them over to marketing@rexel.co.uk and I can forward them on to Brian for you. So yeah, once again, thank you for your time, and we look forward to having you in our future webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.